Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, for listening me today. I will try, to tell you, the story of the succession Picasso, not only with regard with the authentication, but also with the management of the rights, because the both are linked. So, Picasso authenticating issues and strategic consideration. More than 40 years after the death of Pablo Picasso, the problem of how to authenticate his works remains a challenge. The figures speak by themselves. More than 50,000 works, thousands of books written about his life, his works, his contribution to art history, dozens of Picasso exhibitions per year, thousands of requests for using his works, his name, his signature, his likeness each year, millions of unauthorized users, and 1,000 requests for authentication per year. Figures that gives vertigo. The stakes are very high, as far as Picasso is concerned, especially with his work being among the most expensive ever sold. The value of a work can go in smoke if the work is said unauthentic. For the owner of the work, as well as for the art dealer, this is a tremendous issue. This is also a tremendous issue for a market that has always had a culture of secrecy, lack of transparencies, one could say, and that is now infected by money laundering, stolen works, high-class fakes, and forgeries. For the ones who inherited the responsibility of protecting the cultural legacy of an artist and who are handling the daily monitoring of the rights attached to the works, name, and likeness of Pablo Picasso, there was no choice but to take care to take every single step needed to preserve the integrity of the work of their father and grandfather. We all know what authentication means. It is the process of determining whether someone or somebody or something is in fact who or what it is declared to be. In our case, it means determining whether or not the work submitted as an original work of Picasso is true. From a sociological perspective, authentication means an act coming from an authority, a qualified expert, who has the power to impose its decision, even against resistances. As such, authentication is an act of power. The way this authority will organize is not without consequences. The more the structure is uncertain, with its financial, technical, organizational means, the greater is its weakness. And one person's weakness is another's strength. If the succession Picasso has any merit, it is that of understanding that the world has changed and that the succession needed to change with it. In 1985, the succession Picasso has drastically changed the way she was handling her author's rights. She has decided to quit SPADEM, the authors collecting society that was representing, at that time, the Picasso heirs. And the succession Picasso has set up her own organization in Paris called Picasso Administration. The reason was quite simple. SPADEM, as an authors' rights society, wanted to deal only with authors' rights when the succession Picasso needed to deal with authors' rights, but with trademark and right of publicity as well, in order to stop the booming of unauthorized uses in those fields. It was an issue of strategy. In 2012, when 4 of the 5 heirs notified the art market with a circular letter announcing the establishment of Picasso authentication. It was also an issue of strategy. But let's go back for a few minutes to the past. 1979. After the death of Pablo Picasso in April 1973 and the settlement of the estate in 1979, the 5 heirs decided to join SPADAM for copyright management and to establish the Picasso Committee. The committee was in charge of the authentication and of the droit moral issues. Owners and art dealers immediately started to work with the committee. In 1991, however, the committee was disbanded. In the years following the death of Jacqueline Picasso, the widow of Pablo Picasso, drawings coming from sketches started to come out of the blue. These drawings were completely undocumented and were bearing a fake signature of Picasso. For those reasons, some of the members of the committee became seriously suspicious about the provenance of the works and refused to issue a certificate of authenticity when others thought that they should be authenticated, as they were in fact true original from Pablo Picasso. The dealers of those works did what they knew the best. They became aggressive, threatening the people of the committee to sue them, creating havoc among the members of the succession, and leading some of them to resign from their position in the committee. The committee was not strong enough to resist, and it was simply the end of it. The dealers won this battle, undoubtedly, and the succession lost it. The art dealers had to succeed to secure the destruction of the Comité Picasso for greed and money. What the succession Picasso did not know at that time is that another battle has taken place. The same art dealers were not strangers to, but this time, the succession Picasso won. Considering the risk that the Picasso rights and legacy could be in jeopardy, the French court in 1989 appointed Claude Ruiz Picasso as the administrator of the succession Picasso, granting him the authority to monitor and manage the intellectual property rights attached to the works of Pablo Picasso, pecuniary rights, and droit moral included. So, at that moment, we have 5 heirs and 1 authority in the hands of one man, Claude Picasso, the son of Pablo Picasso. Nobody knew at the time that the strength the succession will need years later has taken root in that court decision. During the years the committee existed, 12 years, nearly 500 requests for authentication were submitted to it. 90% of the works at stake were, in fact, true work of Picasso. 1981 to 2012. After the destruction of the Comité Picasso, 2 of the heirs, Mrs. Maya Widmeyer Picasso and his brother, Claude Ruiz Picasso, who was, besides, at that time, the administrator of the estate, began issuing certificates of authenticity, independent of one another. The dealers were free to go to Maya or Claude. This dual option worked well during the first years. It became risky when hundreds of undocumented works came once again out of the blue in 2010. That is, when we received the first letter of an electrician living in the south of France, Pierre Le Guenec, telling us, writing us, that he has worked for Pablo Picasso and his wife, and that he was given by the painter a great number of works, 271 works, exactly, all forgotten by him in his own garage, nearly during 40 years. Undocumented, unlisted, unsigned, unknown, never reproduced, never exhibited works of art. 271 works of Picasso we immediately thought to have been stolen. We did not buy the story of Pierre Le Guenec. Surely you can understand. As if the situation could not be bad enough. At the same time, high-class fakes started to rise, threatening the market. The fake operation, the succession, was facing at that time, and is still facing, was worth 2 to 3 billion of euros, and targeted not only the art market, but other markets as well. The fakes were just following the money. As a reaction to that, members of the succession Picasso started to think that the time has come to simplify the authentication process and to clarify it for the sake of the Picasso market and the cultural legacy of Picasso. It was time for a family to be reunited again and to fight back. In fact, fights were coming fast. And the succession Picasso needed a united family and a strong organization to face them. On September 12, 2012, the organization was set up, and all the actors of the art world were notified that Claude Ruiz Picasso was to rule on the request for authentication in the name and on behalf of the 4 Picasso heirs, and that only his opinion shall be fully and officially acknowledged by them. While many authentication boards and artist foundations have been prompted to disband, the succession Picasso has taken a quite opposite step and accepted the significant legal risks in offering opinions as to authenticity or simply questioning assumptions about title, ownership, and provenance. For Picasso, authentication, provenance, is a crucial information. It's the only way to secure, really, the authenticity of a work and a legitimate ownership with works that have been hidden during decades. And high-skilled criminal organization, providing generally sensational, mysterious news stories, and of course, a detailed art historical research for their fakes and the forgery. The first litigations have already started. Nothing we did not expect. 2 days before, we were in court. The judge were told by the auctioneer's attorney that, and I cite, certificate was only an artistic opinion on the authenticity, and that there was no need to check the provenance of the work to give a certificate. He also said that the position of the succession of Picasso authentication, of refusing to give this certificate was just and reasonable. An interesting position when we all know that due diligences are normally to be conducted by the dealers and auctioneers prior to the sale regarding title, provenance, and authenticity. For us, it solved the question not to check the provenance and the title. Too many dangers there. And we will not be the accomplices, of people who have stolen works or who are trying, to commercialize fakes, even high-quality fakes. The real issue there is that stolen works and fakes are corrupting not only the market, but also the cultural heritage of humanity by infiltrating private and museum collections. And this should be everyone's business and responsibility. So, I also try, to put in schedules what I just told you, in order, to help perhaps better understand what I did. So, this is the current organization of the Succession Picasso with regard, not only to authors' rights, but also to authentication. You can see that this is a very centralized organization. There is no way, to fight pirates, to fight, people of criminal organizations if you are not well organized and ready to fight. So, this is exactly what we did. Considering, the author's rights we extend, the monopoly of property rights at the beginning of the story of the Succession Picasso, it was limited to copyright. We extended that to trademarks and right of publicity. There was, in 1989, a legal court-appointed administrator who has been chosen among the members of the family, Claudia Picasso, the son of Picasso, and he set up Picasso Administration. He set up a company with people, I hope skilled people, working for him and trying, to protect this legacy. On the other side, and since 2012, the family has reunited and Picasso Authentication was set up. And the authority, because it's an act of authority, was given to the administrator of the estate. It was given to Claude Picasso personally, and Claude Picasso is acting and deciding in the name and on behalf of the others. The story of the Succession Picasso regarding the authentication process. From the first step, just after the death of the artist, to nowadays, the committee, the individuals, Maya and Claude, and then Picasso Authentication. Everything has changed. Now, the people are coming to us because they know that it's much better for us, for a good valuation of the work, to have an opinion, from Picasso Authentication. The third schedule is a kind of reflection, consideration about what is really authenticating. Improving the valuation of works, the merchant effect of authenticating, improving the safety of the art market, the security effect of authenticating, and the third one, which is for me, a very important one because it is really strategic. It helps fighting fakes, forgery, and money and stolen work laundering. As you can see, there is different kind of function, for authentication. Authenticating is not only giving an opinion, an artistic opinion of a work. It's something else. There are different kind of approach when you are talking about authenticating. There is an economical function, a public service function. I remind you that regarding the succession Picasso, the authentication are given for free. We do not ask, for money. We sign no agreements. We do not want, people to let us works of art out of question. And that helps a lot. And of course, there is what is very important, for us. There is a protection function for the artistic cultural heritage. The beneficiaries, owners, and art dealers. Beneficiary there, buyers, sellers, sale experts, art dealers. Also, in a way, museums, because we try to avoid to have a corrupted market and fakes in the museums or in private collections. And of course, the protective functions helps. The Picasso has to protect the Picasso legacy, which is the most important work of the succession and of the member of the succession Picasso. So those were, some consideration. This is our story, and I hope, that now you better understand, who we are and what we do. Thanks for listening. Yes, for sure, with pleasure.
Good morning, my name is Daniel Tutel. I have one question. You mentioned that you had about 1,000 requests for authentication each year. Could you tell me how many of those are fakes and how many are authentic works, approximately?
Yeah. 1,000 was the figure of last year, not the figures of this year, because it's growing up. We have different kind of issues, because first of all, we have many reproduction, people that think that they have, discovered a Picasso, in the grenier, in the garage, in everywhere. So we have, to put that aside. We have a lot of fakes, and high-quality fakes. And the true works, I think that they do represent 5%. This is a real issue. Yeah, we have to be very careful.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I have two questions, actually. I'm very concerned about fakes, as I have set up a database for fakes for the Society of Fine Art Auctioneers in Germany, so I'm much into this topic. And on the same time, I've set up a committee for Karl Hofer. The first question I have, you said responsible for the committee are the 5 heirs of Picasso. Is it only the 5 heirs who make the decisions, or do you have a board of restorers, museum experts, and other art historians? This would be one question. And the other question is, how do you deal with the fakes? Do you have any chance to get them out of the market? Because this is the normal problem we are facing in the markets, that fakes come up, you resign them, and then they turn up the next year again, and somebody else has to deal with them.
Regarding the first question, when I was talking about the Committee Picasso, I told you, that 5 members, set up this committee. And this committee was not strong enough, to fight and to resist, to the art dealers' pressure, which means that it was not the good solution, for Picasso authenticating. When in 2012, we decided to change the organization, it was made completely different. There is one man, who is Claude Picasso, who is handling the authentication. And there is one. The other heirs have given, their trust, to Claude Picasso. He is acting on their behalf, in their name, of their behalf. They are thought to assume, all the liabilities and the responsibilities, okay. But there is one man. It's like, driving a car. There is one driver. It's the same. Otherwise, you are not very strong. The second question, how we deal? We fight. And there is different ways of fighting. Of course, we go in court. But it's not always, the best solution, but we have to. Because we have to discourage. We have, to tell, the forgers and the networks that we are there and that we fight. The Le Guinea case is a good example, for example, because when it started, many lawyers and a lot of people said to us that there was no chance for us because the works, it was 40 years after the death of Pablo Picasso, okay, nobody took a picture of the theft or something like that, okay. Nevertheless, we are fighters. We fight it happily because we won the first instance. Hope the next one. So.
My name is Pierre Valentin. You emphasized the importance of provenance. And my question is, say I present to the Picasso Authentication a painting that has all the hallmarks of Picasso, including the signature. But I can't give you any provenance before, say, 1975. What would be your reaction, your response?
Depends. We have archives, okay, and we have a lot of information. I will not disclose here, but we have a lot of information and that are very helpful, okay. But, there is something, that call to us when there is an authentication of the work of Picasso, okay. When there was some suspicion, okay, we were always right because something didn't work well. And you have, to trust yourself, your feeling, your suspicion, it's part of the work you have to do too.
Yes, I think that the structure of the Picasso administration is very much based on national law, on French law. And I just wanted to make a short, very brief comment on this because authentication implies necessarily, at least in Europe, but probably also in other jurisdictions, the exercise of moral rights. Now, moral rights are very differently regulated across Europe. At least I'm talking on, with reference to my own jurisdiction, which is Italy. Moral rights can only be exercised by family members, and family members cannot waive or assign to one of them who could exercise such rights on behalf of the others. So I think when you were telling that it was a trust relationship between family members, I was actually wondering that probably in France, you could also have a legal commitment that could also, be effective vis-a-vis the successors of the actual family members. But in other jurisdictions, family members cannot be constrained to any agreement when it comes to exercising moral rights, which is a big issue. And unfortunately, moral rights, and there's no, European upcoming provision that is aimed at harmonizing these rights. So each jurisdiction has, its own regulation when it comes to moral rights and therefore to authentication. Thank you.
I do not agree with you. You know why? Because I think that you let on the side something that's very important. Behind a judge, there is a man, okay? And the succession Picasso is exercising its rights worldwide. We have had litigations all over the world, especially in the United States. And the moral right of the succession Picasso has been recognized by the judge. All the rights, in the name, in the likeness, in the author's rights, including the moral rights. So it has been, yes?
Based on?
Yeah. The more rights, yeah, exactly. You know, that is reality. The reality is very different from what we can see or what we have learned. And you have to learn a lot from the reality. For example, you know, let me tell you, you know, this story because it was very funny, you know, when we fight it in the United States, at the end of all those fightings we spent years on, there is an American judge that issued a worldwide injunction. I never saw that, you know, in my life before. It was fantastic, you know, because I have this worldwide injunction, and you know, when I have pirates, and so I always show the worldwide injunction. Can you believe it works?
I agree with you. What I was trying to point out is that an Italian artist or an artist from another jurisdiction may not be, you know, allow the same kind of protection that you have.
Perhaps, but sometimes you do not have, you know, to follow the law in a way. Try to understand me when I say that. For example, you know, in France, you know, the right of publicity really does not exist, but we do not care. The problem is that we have to handle a monopoly worldwide, okay? And the market is worldwide too. So what I'm going to do, you know, just stop and say, well, Picasso is a deceased artist, so he has no right of publicity as, this is ridiculous, you know. Sometimes you have, you know, to fight and you have to say, yes, it does exist because in the other country it exists. So we have to fight and find out, you know, the best weapons that you can find to fight and to win, because you have to win.
My name is Wilhelm Hartung. I have a question regarding this middle column where you say you offer the authentication service as a public service. How do you deal with covering the costs associated with the process?
The Succession Picasso is paying for that.
Okay, so
so this is the reason why, you know, the resale right is important, okay? Because in fact it helps a lot, you know, to fund, you know, all these things because it is very costly.
I would like to ask, do you have to be an expert in order to be able to authenticate? So, for example, Claude Picasso, do you have to be an art historian, a curator, or simply that you are the heir?
No, no, not simply because you're the heir. He has to work a lot. You know, he is quite involved in this, and he spent, you know, I think 40 years, you know, to work on, you know, the Picasso legacy and the Picasso work. So he is a qualified person, and he is recognized as such, you know, by the market.
Also
which
from
is, yes, exactly.
Legal point of view, nobody can
no,
fight.
Legal, you know, there is no regulations, you know, regarding the expert in France, so.
Okay, thank you.
I was wondering, you said you have 1,000 requests, numbers going up each year. How do you organize that? How many people are working for Claude Picasso? Is there a process behind it? What is the organizational structure behind it?
This is a complicated, you know, question, in fact, because we all work, you know, for that. What is very interesting, you know, in the way we organize is that at the same time we handle, you know, the rights. And, you know, Claude Picasso, who is the same person, you know, is the administrator and the authenticator, okay? And he is handling, you know, the authenticating, which means that there is an exchange of informations. And don't forget that when we receive, you know, requests for permission for the rights, okay, many things are coming, many informations are coming, okay? Everything is put in our archives, and that is very helpful, you know, for sure. And so we have very good memory, you know. The people who are working there, and this is, you know, something very important, you know, for the Succession Picasso, because really Claude Picasso is very attached, you know, to his team. And because of that, you know, the people who are working there, you know, are working with him for a very long time. And so we work on the file, you know, for many, many years. You know, I spent, you know, 22 years of my life working with him. I have a very good memory, you know, and this is the same for the other people of the team. And so there is trust, there is confidence, there is, this is really very, very important.
Hi, I'm Kim van der Horst from Fondation Constant, and I was wondering, you say you go to court, and I would assume for big, high-quality forgeries that makes sense, but do you, in a way, inform the market when you authenticate smaller works that are not like drawings or whatever? Do you have a way to inform the market of those, or? Because I'm assuming you're not going to court.
You know, I don't think that we have, you know, to inform the market, because the market is well informed, you know, by itself. Really, I can tell you that. You know, the day when we choose to inform the market was an act of authority. It's when we sent a circular letter, you know, to the market, to the art world, you know, to the museums, to the art dealers, the auctioneers, you know, all the people who could have a Picasso work in their hands, okay, and we notify them, because this way there's nobody who can say that it was not aware of.
Okay.
They are aware of.
Thank you, merci beaucoup. I have a question regarding the succession of the administration itself. You mentioned that Claude Picasso is the decision maker. Many of you have worked with him for many years. How are you ensuring that this work will continue over the long term with a succession behind you?
You know, the succession, and I was telling you, you know, in my speech, the succession Picasso adapt. And this is one of its best qualities. You know, it does with what it has, in a way, okay. Claude Picasso has been appointed by a court, okay. So if he resign or if he died, I hope not. And really, you know, the members of the successions will have to go in court. And the decision will be the court's decisions. Of course, you know, the members will express their wishes to the court, but it will be the court decision, okay? And many things will be taken into consideration.
Quick question around the structure of this entity that issues the authenticity. Is it what type of legal structure it is? That's the first question.
There is no legal structure. It's an informal, you know, structure. You do not need to have a structure for that.
Okay. And then the second question is how this function relates to other Picasso heritage entities, the ones that hold work of art. I'm assuming this organization doesn't hold any assets per se, right?
No, this is not a foundation. Okay, so the works belongs, you know, to each member of the succession, because when the heritage has been settled, okay, so they got a certain number of works each. Okay. But the funds are coming, you know, for the succession Picasso are coming from the exercise of the rights, okay, and it helps a lot, you know, for bringing lawsuits when it's needed and so. And what is very interesting in the case of Picasso is that, you know, for many years, you know, I heard the story, you know, of their life, and everybody was saying, you know, family Picasso is very complicated, you know, they fight against each other, which is completely untrue. You know, you must remember that when Picasso died, you know, he left about more than 50,000 works, and there was 200,000, you know, of personal archives, you know, for Picasso. It was a big mess. And they spent only 6 years, you know, to settle the estate, which is nothing. And, you know, I worked for them for 22 years, and really they work all together. And they have, which is the most important, really the will, you know, to protect, you know, the legacy, the cultural legacy of Pablo Picasso. But they are very modern, and they understand that they have to deal with, what is around them, all the markets and all, the changement, the technology, the laws, and so we have to deal with many things. We are not living in the past. We are living in the present and hoping, living, in the futures as well.
Thank you very much, Madame Andrieu. Thank you all for your question, but I think we have to go on.